Hi, everybody. It's Tuesday, March 4th, 2025, and our friend Pepe Escobar is back with us. Welcome back, Pepe.
Yeah, the most important thing, Nima. Welcome to Asia, everybody. Welcome to Thailand, right behind me. My home in Asia for 30 years. And this is where it rocks, ladies and gentlemen. Best place in the world, hands down. You see how relaxed I am? It's because I'm here. So now I can laugh about all this stupidity all across the planet because I'm here in Thailand. Okay, good to see you, Nima. Good to see you all.
So let's get started with the troubles.
Oh,
Little
shit.
bit of Pepe. We had a meeting between Donald Trump and Zelensky,
Epic,
which had
epic.
no conclusion, no outcome, but some sort of chaos. Here is what JD Vance said yesterday in his interview with Fox News
Mhm.
in terms of the way that Donald Trump is seeing the conflict in Ukraine and what is their understanding of the Biden administration and the way they were implementing the policies. Here is what he said.
When you would talk to the Biden administration officials in private, this is another example of a terrible situation the Biden admin left the Trump administration. When you ask them what's the plan, okay, we're going to spend tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in Ukraine. What is your plan? And they would honestly tell you, well, we're just going to send them weapons for as long as we can and hope eventually they can turn the tide. Hope is not a strategy. Throwing money and ammunition at a terrible conflict, that is not a strategy. The only guy in town with a strategy is the President of the United States, and everybody needs to follow his lead.
What scares me is Zelensky, when he says it's going to go on for years, how many more lives are going to be lost? He's not going to have a country to save at the end of that. The minerals deal would have provided the monies to rebuild their country and a strong U.S. presence and maybe European troops as well.
And this is an important part of it. The president knows that, look, if you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. The security guarantee and also the economic guarantee for Ukraine is to rebuild the country and ensure that America has a long-term interest. You're not going to do that if you come to the Oval Office, insult the president, and refuse to follow his plan for peace.
Yeah. Your take, Pep.
Well, Vance is very well articulated. What he said is essentially correct, even by omitting the most important part, which this is a proxy war initiated by the US against Russia. He cannot say that, obviously. So they are just in containment mode now. They want this thing to end as soon as possible because they have other foreign policy priorities. And sinking unimaginable amounts of funds and weapons in Ukraine, any businessman can see that this is not only bad for business, but this is absolutely absurd. So from, let's say, the ringmaster of the whole circus, we are all spectators of Mr. Disco Inferno and Mr. Ringmaster of the Circus now. He says one word, one adjective, or one small sentence, and that monopolizes the news cycle 24/7, day after day after day. So this is the new reality. This is the new paradigm. Perhaps around 80 to 90% of what he says is absolute nonsense, but buried in this, I would say, supply chain of non-stop nonsense, you find a few nuggets. And if you follow the money, the nuggets are always there, expressed by Trump in plain language that a 6-year-old can understand, of course. the usual pattern of reiterating what he wants to say over and over again. So then it crushes your school, because it's basically saying the same thing over and over and over again in a very simplified manner. And of course, for all of us, it's, I would say, absolutely pointless to try to to conceptualize what he's saying here. But his targets are very, very clear. First of all, it's a process of erasing everything in terms of foreign policy that the previous administration of the cadaver in the White House and the Secretary of Genocide, little Tony Blinken, everything that they did and everything that they were selling every day across the collective West. Very important, because the global South and the global majority, they stopped buying what the Democrats were selling a long time ago. But the so-called collective West they were still totally, follow the leader mode, right? What's happening now is fascinating, Nima, and our audience. The collective West doesn't exist anymore. The collective West is now dead. The ringmaster buried the collective West. Now there's only one West that matters, the empire. And now there's no more rules-based international order, which was propagated by the dead collective West until, of course, January. Now is the no rules-based international disorder. And obviously, Trump is a master of instilling disorder and spreading chaos. Sometimes he doesn't even have a further agenda. It's just the way he operates as, of course, a master of spectacle. He's never thinking about, usually he's never thinking about the next plot twists. There's a lot of improvisation, of course, but some of the ideas, at least in his mind, are very, very clear. So first of all, we're not going to lose money anymore in this absolutely ridiculous enterprise, which Trump didn't start. The Democrats started. This is factually correct because the war, for many reasons, of course, but if we go back to Maidan, this was an Obama Democrats operation through and through. So yes, the Democrats started 2014 Maidan, and obviously when the special military operation was launched by Russia, because there was no other way for Putin to deal with the imminent blitzkrieg avalanche against Donbass, the Democrats were in power. We should not forget that when Trump is in power, he was, slapping sanctions against Russia as well, and in his own Trumpian way, also demonizing Russia, and never addressing the root causes of the war in Ukraine. So now, consider that he doesn't have much time. This is very, very important. And this is something we have to go back to it over and over again. His emphasis is not foreign policy, it's domestic policy, because he has a massive, I would say, a Sisyphus style fight, rolling the rock uphill against his internal domestic enemies, and they are still very powerful. So to concentrate on that, he has to solve some foreign policy problems, including the most obvious one, this war where the US is basically sinking funds and weapons. Second, Trump looks at Europe and see a bunch of gigantic, massive, cosmic, intergalactic losers. He doesn't respect anybody in the European Union, period. And considering that the Brits are out of the EU, he has a little bit of respect for some sectors of the British ruling classes. That's a completely different story. And we're not talking about British state or British government. And Europeans, of course, they don't even qualify as chihuahuas. So step 2 of Trump's targeting. Okay, You want to continue this war because it's more than obvious that the European Union, the European Commission, and this congregation of Chihuahuas want to continue the war because they bet everything on it, and there's no plan B because there never was any plan B. All right, so pay up 5% of GDP, all of you, pay up on NATO, and buy our American weapons to continue your war. It's not going to be our American war anymore, which is very, very clever because he wins twice. The US roughly, it's between 47 to 50% of NATO's budget comes from the US. Trump looks at the numbers and says, that's it. No way. Forget it. So now he's going to make the Europeans pay twice, 150% raise on their contributions to NATO, plus buying even more weapons from the American industrial military complex. So what happened this past week, including I would say, in terms of unscripted dementia, no screenwriter on the planet could ever imagine that this would happen. And in terms of diplomacy, this is already in the diplomacy books for the rest of the century and beyond, and inside the Oval Office on top of it. But this was a disaster waiting to happen. Don't forget that Zelensky all this time has been like a sort of spoiled brat of the collective West, the way he was treated by the whole thing, from Washington to Brussels and the capitals of the collective West. So comes a new ringmaster circus and said, look, this gig is over, man. Get real. And I'm telling you what you have to do. And whatever you say, shut up because you don't have the cards. Literally. These words by Trump himself. So can you imagine in the mind of a very, very, okay, I'll try to be diplomatic, disturbed character like Zelensky, and on top of it, cocaine. Everybody who is familiar with cocaine knows the long-term effect of sniffing 2, 3, 4 grams a day, day after day, which is his case. Obviously, can you imagine your ego trip and your fantasies of your hegemonic fantasies, as put it the way, they evaporate, they are punctured instantly. And when that happened inside the Oval Office, his reaction was totally predictable, completely predictable. He couldn't even imagine that he was inside the Oval Office in the White House and antagonizing and disrespecting at the same time the president and the vice president of the United States. People who are on coke, Nima, in our audience, they don't think along these lines. Their sensation of invulnerability is, predominates over everything. So it's no wonder that later he was trying, oh shit, I fucked up. Oh yeah, you did, big time. And now, from the point of view of Trump, who takes all these things personally, not diplomatically, that's it. That's the end. So now we have a list of variables applied to what might happen to Zelensky. You can have the mafia treatment. They can whack him, snuff him out, put him in the in the trunk of a departing car, coup d'état, you name it. But he's over. He's a dead man walking. And on that, that's very tricky because it aligns with what Putin has been saying from a legalistic point of view. We cannot have a conversation with Kiev because this president is illegitimate. We need a legitimate party to start discussing. And in his own ringmaster circus reality show way, Trump has arrived to the same conclusion. We have to get rid of this guy. The thing from now on is the number one question on all the questions from now on, how to get rid of this guy. So as we can all see, Nima, you and our audience, these past few days, frantic arrangements by the dead collective West, right? The Chihuahuas in Europe, everybody, Macron, Starmer, etc. The toxic Medusa von der Leyen, who, by the way, this week, she's going to present her plans for an European army. So everybody, start laughing now, even before it happens, because you know when it happens, you're going to be roaring with laughter and rolling at the aisles with laughter. Because we know that an army, NATO, non-NATO, Chihuahuas from Latvia, Lithuania, the Baltics, or without Poland, with German contributions or not, whatever that is, or whatever that army is, and of course the mighty British army, who cannot save a wimpy burger corner shop in Hampstead. Can you imagine these guys fighting the fighting-proof Russian army? So they will surrender in between 5 to 10 minutes, because between 5 and 10 minutes is the time they're going to take to understand that if they keep going on, they'll be instantly transformed into charcoal grilled burgers or steak tartare or something similar. So this is a sub joke inside the biggest joke, which is the Europeans are trying to come up with a solution apart from Trump's solution for Ukraine. So, this brief description that I gave all of you, you can see all the superimposed Kafkaesque, surrealist, and frankly demented elements in this whole farce, fantasy. It's an enormous farce now being played in public. It's like a reality show Dadaist piece, because most of it makes no sense whatsoever, in fact, with non sequiturs, with dead ends, etc. But there's one thing that is clear, at least from the Trumpian point of view. They want to end this kabuki their way, which does not mean that they know how to end the war. Because from all this kabuki taking place basically in the dead collective West, the Russians outside from Moscow, they are looking at it with, I would say, a mix of disbelief and perplexity. And obviously they cannot contain a little smirk as well. Even if we prayed for this, this would never happen the way it's happening, of course. But none of that means that there is a convergence of interest in how to end the war. First of all, because the Americans are not yet, they are not mentally prepared. And I'm talking about Team Trump 2.0, to understand what it takes to really end the war, because they will have to integrate the Russian point of view and the Russian analysis, which has been, disseminated all over since June last year. Because they know that even if they don't know, instinctively they know that if they do that, this implicitly recognizes the massive strategic defeat, in this case, of the collective West, including the United States, and the United States in itself against Russia. They cannot admit that. So they're going to try to come up with some sort of formulation where Trump finds a sort of way out of this whole mess, throws the whole burden from now on to Europe, whatever configuration it is, European Union, NATO, non-NATO, whatever, and they start doing something else. But the war will not end. That's the most important part. The Russians already said, look, Ukraine is a small microcosm of a big picture. And this is indivisibility of security, a new security arrangement, post-Soviet space, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, NATO, etc. Relations between US and Russia have to be reestablished, and at least they are already starting that. This is a true start already. But this is the first step, because when they establish a measure of trust on both sides, then We're going to start getting to the nitty gritty, which is the real discussion. And then everything is at play, Nima. INF, all sorts of missiles, spheres of influence, a possible new Yalta, the meeting face to face between Putin and Trump, etc. We are still very far away from all that. So for the moment we are, I would say, this is the starter at the moment is this absolutely crazy circus that's been rolling on since last week. So we are on stage 1. Get ready when we get to stage 7 or 8. Then things are going to be really serious.
Yesterday, uh, the British media was reporting on the meeting between Zelensky and Stormer, which has happened after the meeting with Donald Trump, in which Zelensky said that reaching a deal with the United States is far, far away. And Donald Trump was so just retweeting, just posting what Zelensky said and saying, this is ridiculous. This is not the way that it works. And he was just attacking Zelensky. Today, we've learned that Yermak, and I don't know how we can call him, he's the right hand of Zelensky, he's the most powerful figure in Ukraine after Zelensky. If Zelensky is the most
I know. Let's call him the neo-Nazi Richelieu for all of you familiar with French history.
Yeah. And he said that they're ready 100% to reach a deal with the United States. Here comes the role of the British government, Stormer, and the way they're trying to communicate with Ukrainians, with Zelensky, and bring them to the table. It seems that they did everything to facilitate the deal between the United States and Ukraine. You've mentioned about the British elites who are connected, who are respected by neocons in the United States. I want to know more about that. What do we know about these people? Are these people are connected? Are the same as we call in the United States neocons? Are they seeking the same sort of policies? Are they cooperating with the United States to benefit the British government, the United Kingdom? What do we know about that?
Well, we have to make a distinction. Let's say probably 3 different vectors. Old money in the UK, which is a few families, most of them with connections with the Windsors. Well, they have global interests, although they are not globalists per se. The MI6, which is an institution in itself. The MI6 basically is British intel, classic British intel, since they perfected let's say by the time of the new great game in the 19th century, before of course, but they reached their apex between the new great game and the First World War, and then between both wars, because they wanted to get the maximum for the empire. All that. In the end, of course, the whole thing collapsed. But there are some very well prepared people, and they know about intel, gathering intel, collecting intel, disseminating intel, and twisting intel, that the Americans, compared to them, are chihuahuas. No question about that. So they are admired across the Beltway, right? And the third factor is, of course, these ultra mediocre political elites, which in the case of Britain these past few years, they are in a class by themselves. We tend to think that the whole script, this has been a long-running, non-stop Monty Python sketch with abysses of tragedy and, in many cases, tragicomical effects, in fact. This current prime minister, Jesus, this guy is not, he cannot run a boarding school. Can you imagine a country as complex as the UK? Anyway, so these 3 are, they are, let's say there is they are intertwined to a certain extent, but they have their own different agendas. The case of MI6 in terms of Ukraine is very, very peculiar because their man, until a while ago, was Zelensky, not anymore. They are already grooming their new man, Zaluzhny. Zaluzhny as Ukrainian ambassador in London, that's only for idiots to believe. He's being groomed by MI6 to be the next ruler and following a British agenda, not an American agenda. The Americans, they still don't know what the Brits are, the way the Brits are conforming Zaluzhny's mind. This is a very sophisticated operation. So the Brits already have their next man. So the thing is, they need to convince the Americans that this is the right man for everyone. If the Americans start digging deeper, they won't like what they see. Subtext to all this is there is no, once again, very important, there is no definitive evidence, but all signs point to a deal already signed by Zelensky and Starmer, the famous 100-year deal, where basically Zelensky was selling Ukraine to the Brits, including the famous rare, the non-existent rare earth wells, right? They have some metals west of the Dnieper. They have some metals, maybe very small rare earth deposits. Everybody who did their homework knows that the bulk of the rare metals and rare earths are east of the Dnieper and now belong to Russia. They are in Novorossiya. Everybody knows that. So what did they sign exactly? And how could the head of a British government sign a deal like this with an illegitimate president? Totally illegal. Everything around this deal is illegal, right? Okay, they'll have a battery of British lawyers to make it legal later on, but essentially this is illegal. So now we have a direct clash between what the Brits want out of Ukraine, what the Europeans want out of Ukraine, which for the moment is less than zero and will continue to be less than zero, because this deal was the Brits and Zelensky. And what Trump 2.0 wants in terms of clinching this possible rare metals, rare earths deal, which was scotched at last minute because of the drama at the Oval Office. So we already see, the famous special relationship, they are diverging completely. They have two completely different visions of what can we extract from this black void called Ukraine and what Ukraine will survive. We still don't know what Ukraine will survive at the end, because it will depend on how far the Russians want to go. It's going to be probably a rump Ukraine, which could be as contained and small as the Ukraine of 1654, or it could have maybe a little more territory to the west that is not going to be gobbled up by Poland, Hungary, and Romania. Nobody knows anything about this. Nobody knows, right? But the Brits, in terms of, they do their intel homework better than anybody else, literally. So we have to respect them for that. So they have clinched this so-called very, very shady deal. And obviously the Americans, they want to clinch their own deal because, after all, they are the superpower. They are still the empire. And obviously, facing the Brits, they will slap the Brits and said, our deal works, not yours. Yours is fiction. We are the empire. What we say, rule. This is what empires do. And obviously, the Brits are not even a possession of the empire. The Brits are an attachment to the empire. What's important, of course, is the geoeconomic, the way they are geoeconomically intertwined, and the way, of course, Wall Street, City of London, money from the global north and the global south that circulates in London. All that very, very important, of course. But in terms of who rules, everybody know who rules, and now is the circus ringmaster. So there are a lot of contradictions in this whole story. What the Brits want is one thing, what the Europeans want with their army of chihuahuas another thing, and what Trump 2.0 is the overarching thing. And they want to get what they want as soon as possible. Even if they don't solve the war, which the way we see it for the moment is practically unsolvable. Because what the Americans would like to get out of this is, from the Russian point of view, is absolute anathema. And we don't see Putin selling out on Ukraine, because Russian public opinion will be extremely harsh if he makes too many concessions. From what we hear so far from people around Putin, Security Council, Minister of Foreign Relations, etc., there will be no concessions. If they don't find a way that is acceptable on the table, the special military operation will keep going on. So this brings us to the possibility that the timeline that everybody had in mind until, let's say, a week or 10 days ago, that the war stops in 2025, not anymore. This war may well go to all the way to 2026.
Do you think that with the new deal between the United States and Zelensky, as you mentioned, most of the what's called minerals that the United States is interested in, and rare earth that they're talking about, are, as you mentioned, are located in the eastern part of Ukraine, which are under the control of Russia and part of Russia right now. How about the way that J.D. Vance is picturing this situation in the aftermath of a Ukrainian settlement? He says that an economy, that the economic ties between the United States and Ukraine would bring some sort of security guarantee for Ukrainians. And don't you think that they're thinking at the same time having a new contract between the United States and Russia as well in terms of rare earth? And they can have two contracts with Ukrainian and with Russians in terms of, because they're looking for, they want to make chips, semiconductors, and AI. Their focus is on this. And the way that Donald Trump is stuck, it's all about the competition between the United States and China.
Of course.
And how do you see the way that J.D. Vance is trying to convince Ukrainians that an economic tie between the United States and Ukraine, considering the deal, this mineral deal, would bring security guarantee for Ukraine? Is that convincing for Ukrainians, in your opinion?
The problem is who's is trying to convince Dima. It's absolutely pointless to try to convince Zelensky. He won't be there after a while. It can be the next few days, the next few weeks, the next few months, but he's out of the picture. He's expendable. His usefulness is over. And after he antagonized the president of the United States, bye. It's not coming back. Whatever happens, not coming back. And Trump takes all these things very personally. So for the moment, Vance is, these are sound bites, because the news cycle, as you know, is extremely voracious. You need something new every day, even if it's a sentence. Feeds the news cycle, but there's no substance to it. What they really want is recover of course, the numbers, any sort of numbers. Let's say realistically between $200 and $300 billion overall. This is relatively realistic without getting into detail. They believe that if they strike a deal with Ukraine, they can recover that long term with the rare metals and the rare earths that are actually in what is left of the future Ukraine. But perhaps they didn't do their homework very, very well. Perhaps they still don't know that the bulk is with the Russians. And now Putin, almost casually, like, if he was lighting a cigar, oh, I had an idea. Why don't you come here and you invest in rare metals and rare earths here in Russia? Let's become partners. Is this as simple as it sounds? No, this is immensely clever, because this will be a direct way to destroy sanctions against Russia, because the Americans will be business partners with Russia. Sanctions, forget it, not anymore. And they are already, after that previous meeting was like, between 5 and 6 hours, the meeting in Istanbul.
6.5, yeah,
6.5, 6.5, exactly. They are starting to discuss the business nitty-gritty, which is something that appeals to both sides, appeals to US businessmen, and appeals to Russian oligarchs as well. In the near future, we can have Russian oligarchs and American businessmen partners again. And don't forget, this is something that in Moscow circles carries a lot of weight, because Putin has to manage several ultra high powered oligarchs, and obviously he needs to offer them some I wouldn't say crumbs, but something tangible, so they don't start having ideas later on, political ideas. That's the deal. Invest in Russia. Don't think about political stupidity. You can have anything you want. I'll try my best to protect your interests in terms of your international operations, as long as you invest in Russia and you pay your taxes in Russia. This is not going to change. So, opening a new land bridge directly between Russian oligarchs and American businessmen, wow, this is a super Xi Jinping style win-win. So no question on this front. The question is the size of the deal, and the question is how Putin is going to sell this to Russian public opinion. Until yesterday, the empire was trying to destroy Russia, and now they are business partners. This is going to be a really hard sell to Russian public opinion as a whole, in fact. I was discussing this in Russia. I was still in Russia last week, in fact, before I came here. And in two of our meetings, this was part of the discussion. And my interlocutors, very well informed, they said, yes, if this happens, it's going to be very hard to sell it. But it has to be ironclad, and Putin has to explain that this clearly to Russian public opinion, that this is in the national interest of Russia, which is something that he could do easily, right? But the image and the optics of doing business with the empire who tried to destroy you until yesterday, this is going to be really, really tough, very tough. But we've seen stranger things throughout this the beginning of the war, right, Nima? And this was the last sentence that I met the great Sergei Glaziev about a week, less than a week ago in Moscow when I came back from Lebanon. And at the end, Mr. Glaziev said, this is a very strange war. And he kept ringing on my head this past week with that. This is a perfect definition. There are many things that none of us can explain. And I would say the main actors in this whole drama, they also cannot explain. Could anybody imagine that we will have this Oval Office drama playing out in front of the whole planet before it did? No. So there are a lot of very strange things happening in different nodes of the war, and sometimes they don't connect. What, of course, Trump 2.0 wants is a swift end to the whole thing, because Trump 2.0, they have better fish to fry. And of course, the real war is against China, as everybody knows. And Russia, of course, because Russia wants to go back to having a measure of normal business with the West, even if not with Europeans. Europeans don't want to be part of it. Europe doesn't. Russia doesn't need Europe anymore. If you are in Russia, if you live in Russia, if you pay attention to how Russian businesses are dealing with they're the new world in terms of business for them is the Eurasia, global South, global majority, Arab nations, Southeast Asia, here, ASEAN, this is the future. Africa, this is the future for them. They don't need Europe. And obviously the Europeans will be even more isolated from everything. When it's in itself, it's beyond stupid what the batshit crazy Estonian chick said. But conceptually, she expressed how completely disconnected Europe is from the 21st century as a whole. When she said, oh, if we cannot stand up against Russia, how are we going to stand up against China? This was one of the most stupid foreign policy utterances since the fall of the Roman Empire. It's on the record. But at the same time, it's a graphic illustration of where Europe stands at the moment. 6 feet under.
I think, Pepe, with what you've mentioned, the economic ties between the United States and Russia, if somehow they can reach a deal in terms of rare earth and minerals that the United States is interested in, they can go to the next level. That shows how smart Putin is, how smart he's moving, he's changing the game. They're gonna have a new contract, an important and so much crucial contract with the United States that is much more influential than what it was with Nord Stream pipeline. And nobody can do anything with that in the future, since the United States is interested in, has this is the game changer sort of attitude on the part of Putin. I don't know. And he can guarantee that even after Donald Trump, whoever comes to power in the United States is not going to be able, would not be able to change this sort of ties between Russia and the United States, or moving against Russia, because they have their interest in Russia, in the eastern part of Ukraine, now called Russia.
If hardcore business interests on both sides are involved, Nima, we can say that even if, don't forget, until literally yesterday, Lavrov was saying every week, the United States is non-agreement capable. That's the official definition, which is absolutely correct. But now it's different. Now you have a different administration, which is a pro-business administration. And if hardcore business in the US, okay, we need to do business with Russia, it's in our interest and our American national interest as well, as it is for the Russians, this would supersede the fact that the US is non-agreement capable. Okay, there's a lot of ifs in that equation, right, Nima? But it will be a strong argument for future presidents, for instance, of future administrations, not to try to break it. Well, of course, the whole thing has to be ironclad, signed, you name it. We all know that. But when you have businesses directly implicated, it changes the game completely, right? The Nord Stream angle that you mentioned is even more fascinating, because can you imagine that the Germans have in front of them the salvation for their disappearing economy. Until now, they didn't take it. There's no guarantee that with the Black Rock, a new chancellor, they will take it. But it's still there in front of them. So what is the Americans trying to do? We still don't know an solid official reaction from Russia and from Gazprom yet. We still don't have it. But the Americans are trying to come up with the idea that if they have a negotiator on their side with Gazprom, they can have Nord Stream 2 put back together. And they will sort of manage the whole operation. But how? With Gazprom, without Gazprom, 50-50, how? Anyway. And then Russia will be again selling first-class energy, super prices to Germany all over again, with the Americans as business partners involved in the whole equation. It's a solution. This is fascinating. The devil, of course, is in details. What Russia is going to get back apart from selling gas to Germany again, which basically they don't care. They're selling their gas via third parties to Europe still, and to China, India, their Asian customers. They already did the pivoting, the energy pivoting, right? But the fact that this is now in play is absolutely extraordinary. And on top of it, there will have to be inside Germany, not with BlackRock Chancellor, of course, a thorough investigation about Nord Stream and the fact that the previous government basically facilitated the bombing of both Nord Streams. Shows is directly implicated in an operation that is basically treason. This is immensely serious. But now that the Americans are theoretically trying to get involved into the Nord Stream drama all over again, they may find a way out to tell the Germans, look, we're doing you a favor. You're going to have some of the energy that you need back. But this is the list of conditions. Obviously, there will be an enormous list of conditions presented by the Americans to the Germans to facilitate this deal with Gazprom. But the fact that this is back on the table is absolutely extraordinary. It still does not invalidate what Cy Hirsch published and discovered, and so far is the #1 explanation of how Nord Stream was bombed. And if a thorough investigation will go all the way, a lot of very important people would land in jail. And that's why there's no investigation.
Pepe, I really do believe that what Russia was looking for in December 2021 with the new security architecture of Europe can be achieved through the contract between the United States and Russia, which would be a foundation for even Nord Stream, for any future tie between Europeans and Russia, because the foundation is the deal between Russia and the United States. Now you can build a structure on this foundation, which would benefit Europe in a long run. Do they really understand it? Is that understandable for them?
Who understand it?
Europeans, because
No, of
what
course.
Donald
No, of
Trump
course
is
not.
trying to do is building a foundation, which they can build their sort of structure on this foundation. So
No, they can't understand because the current political elites in Europe are linked to the Democrats, linked to Davos, linked to Great Reset, woke East, you name it. Virtually all of them, with very, very few exceptions. The exceptions are to the East, Czechia, Hungary, maybe Austria, depending on how you see it. These are the exceptions. The rule is what Brussels says, and everybody follows. The people who run Brussels, they are all not American agents per se, Democrat Party, Great Reset, Davos agents. That's the narrow definition, right? So first of all, these people need to disappear. It's going to take a while, quite a long while. It will happen, but it's going to take a while. Then later on, if we have sovereigntist governments in some European capitals, this could change. But this will automatically imply in the dissolution and then probably very, very fast dissolution of the mechanism of the European Union. So we have a possibility ahead, let's say the next few, until the end of the decade, let's put it this way, optimistically, that this process of dissolution of NATO and the European Union, which is in parallel, will pick up speed. There's no question about that. But it's going to be extremely complicated because the backlash by the Davos, wokeist, globalist, Democrat Party elites will be massive against Trump 2.0, against everybody else, against relative independents like Orban in Hungary. But this clash is already on, and the split is already clear. And clear for a lot of European citizens, in fact, trans-pan-European citizens. It's not reflected in the polls. In the ballot boxes yet. It reflects in some of the polls. It's reflected in I would say, little by little, the accrued power of independent media in several nations, even in France. You have independent media in France, especially on radio, growing steadily, which is something that you didn't see until a year or 2 years ago. So there's some sort of hope. How this is going to break out? It's going to be civil war everywhere? No, not really, because Europeans are mostly desperate of high cost of living, inflation, how they can pay their bills and their taxes, and they are terrified of losing the few benefits that they still have. So the capacity of political mobilization all across Europe is very, very limited, But at least the panorama is moving compared to a year ago, year and a half ago. But there's still the main point, Nima, is that this self-ejection from the movement of history, which is something that is, wow, it's going to take us a while to conceptualize, write about it. There's going to be a series of studies with the chronology of this, I would say, progressive seppuku. And the reasons, of course, for all that, how it's intertwined, how the media led to that as well. When you see how European mainstream media in all the different nations, they basically are press releases of what Brussels says about anything. And Brussels, I mean, not only the European Union, but also NATO. So we have NATO dictating everything, European Union as the political arm of NATO, and all the European chihuahuas in the capitals reproducing what comes from Brussels. This is how the system works. How are you going to change the system? Very tough. And this is going to take, okay, optimistically until the end of the decade. Realistically, probably until 2040, at least.
Here is what J.D. Vance said about Europe. Pepe.
Friends, frankly, are being really, they're doing a disservice to the Ukrainians because their own populations are saying, we're not going to fund this war indefinitely. The American people are saying, we don't want to fund the war indefinitely. So the only thing that is in the best interest of America, of Russia, of Ukraine, and of Europe is to bring this thing to a close. What happened, Sean, is you have Zelensky. He goes to Europe, and a lot of our European friends puff him up. They say, you're a freedom fighter. You need to keep fighting forever. Well, fighting forever with what? With whose money, with whose ammunition, and with whose lives? The president is actually taking a much more realistic perspective and saying this can't go on forever. We can't fund this thing forever. The Ukrainians can't fight forever. So let's bring this thing to a peaceful settlement.
It's kind of strange to see the vice president of the United States, after having the Biden administration, is talking about a deal that everyone would benefit from that.
And everything he says, Nima, is very sound.
Yeah.
Of course, he omits. We all know what he's omitting. All what led to this current situation. But his diagnostic of what's really happening now, it's extremely sound. It's something that we haven't heard from, well, a vice. Can you imagine the previous vice president of the United States? So it's a glimmer of hope, obviously. But once again, beginning of our conversation, this is just the early stages of this grand bargain that will have to be struck between Washington and Moscow, and they haven't even started yet. Then we're going to see, then will be fissures. Then we're going to have conflicts on the table. Then we're going to have the Russians trying to explain to Trump 2.0. What you want is unrealistic because of in detail with numbers, etc. The Russians are masters doing that. But what Vance is selling to American public opinion and to global public opinion is quite sound. Essentially, that's it. Okay, let's start from there. Then the nitty-gritty really starts.
Pepe, what's so amazing about the European countries, as JD Vance was mentioning, that European countries, the leaders of these countries are thinking the way that the Biden administration was thinking of the conflict in Ukraine. They want security. They want security through military action, operations. And what the Trump administration is offering them, and security guarantee through economic ties. This doesn't, it's not understandable for them. They don't understand they can bring a deal that would benefit each and everybody. Here is what the Finnish president said in terms of what they can offer to Ukraine. Here is what he said.
Amongst everything, we also need an American backstop for any peace and any peace enforcement. Do you think you'll be able to convince them that that is something that they need to do? And I'm not talking about US boots on the ground, but all the other things.
Yeah, I hope we can. I mean, there's so many ways in which that can be done. Let me just give one example, which has been put forward by Senator Lindsey Graham from the United States, because right now it seems to be difficult for Ukraine to become a NATO member anytime soon, because the United States and Germany are quite skeptical about that. So why don't we instead give them a de facto NATO membership, which basically means that when the negotiations end and we have a peace settlement, a part of it all is to say that if Russia ever breaks that settlement or breaks the ceasefire, attacks Ukraine again, Ukraine becomes automatically a member of NATO. I think that is a strong enough backstop.
Do you see the difference? Do you see the way that they're talking?
No, but this is absolutely stupid. Russia doesn't break agreements. Russians respect agreements. It's the Americans that break agreements. It's Europeans that don't respect agreements. Minsk II, excellent example. So their rhetoric turns everything upside down. Where you have this big monster over there who's going to attack, another Chihuahua sooner or later. This is, well, only idiots buy this, of course, but. Idiots like this Finnish president, which is particularly good at what he's doing, being an idiot. This is what they sell to their own public opinion and to European public opinion. And obviously the media all across Europe, mainstream media, they reproduce this to death. This is the only thing that you hear when you tune in to the newscast at night on every European nation and the mainstream papers. This is not going to change, unfortunately. What the Russians can do when they sit down to the Americans is explain not only to the Americans but to global public opinion again. Look, the backstory leading to Maidan in 2014, what happened between 2014 and the SMO, why we had to launch the SMO. The Russians will have to be, once again, very didactic. They have to explain from scratch the whole thing because of the brainwashing nonstop, even before Maidan, over 10 years. In the dead collective West, you have to confront them with facts. And even if you confront them with facts, they're not very good at admitting facts. They only follow their own agenda. And we all remember the agenda from the beginning. What was it? Inflict a strategic defeat against Russia, try to break Russia from within, and then collect the morsels and finally exterminate Russia as a big power player. They failed on all aspects miserably, cosmically, intergalactically. There's no plan B because they never had a plan B. And that's why they continue with this bullshit, Nima. Let's have 30,000 boots on the ground. Let's have planes in the air, boots on the ground. You know, toy planes flying over Ukraine. This doesn't even qualify as childish, because they refuse to see reality. Trump 2.0, to their credit so far, at least they saw the reality. This war is absurd. This war is unwinnable, and we have to get out of it. But we have to also try to make a profit out of it. That's all it matters. All the nya from the Chihuahuas is totally irrelevant, including what the Finnish idiot just said. No wonder, because once again, because they brought this on themselves. This was a war, of course, it was a proxy war by the empire, but it was once again, go back to history. The Swedes, the Polish, Lithuanian Commonwealths, Napoleon, Hitler, everybody, it's always the same shit. It's trying to subdue Russia. Sorry, history tells you that you don't do that. And Bismarck told all of you, you don't do that. First thing you do is you do a deal with Russia. Otherwise, you're going to be screwed, as you are now. This is the number one history lesson of this whole thing. So Trump 2.0, at least, even if not conceptually, because they're not big-time strategists, but at least instinctively they understand that this is a losing. Okay, to put it in their own language, this is a losing game, and we need to get out of it. And if those idiots over there in Europe want to continue, it's their problem, not ours. That's it. That's the short version.
Yeah. Zooming out a little bit, right now, Donald Trump is imposing 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
And China as well.
And doubling the tariffs, which were 10% right now, 20% in China.
20%.
China responded immediately that they're going to have additional tariffs on the United States from 10 to 15%.
Yes. And the two sessions in Beijing, they start tomorrow. Very, very important. The two sessions is when basically lawmakers in China conceptualize and organize Chinese economic policies. So obviously they'll have to take this into consideration. I'm very curious to see what's going to come out starting tomorrow. Today, one day before the start, their spokesman said something absolutely extraordinary directed to the Global South. Basically, he said to the whole Global South, do you want a global reliable partner? Look at us. He doesn't need to say anything else. This will be understood from, I wouldn't say Argentina because Argentina is being destroyed by the chainsaw idiot. From Uruguay to Somalia to here, Thailand, Myanmar, and Papua New Guinea, everybody will understand what that means. We do business with the Chinese. The Chinese respect contracts, their business. They sell us good material for a decent price. They are good business partners, and they are reliable. That's all you need to know. And they're not going to slap sanctions against any of us. There you go. The guy can sell China to the Global South with 2 or 3 sentences, which is exactly what he did today.
Yeah, it's understandable that Donald Trump wants to fight China, but at the same time, if he wants to support or make dollars stronger, there has to be some sort of understanding in terms of reducing sanctions on other countries. Is that going to be the case?
It's not the way they think, Nima.
So how How would that be possible?
I,
Making
no,
dollars from?
no, nobody knows. This is Trump's instinctual. Uh, he's instinctually, this is what he does. He says that tariffs are the best thing in the world. He doesn't understand how tariffs work, and he doesn't understand the blowback of tariffs. And he didn't understand the blowback of the tariffs he unleashed against China during Trump 1.0. The blowback was enormous and led China to even accelerate the pace of research that they had by 2016, 17, 18. And now we're looking at the results in 2025. China leads on the Made in China 2025 project. China is leading in almost every high-tech sector. I think the only ones where they're not leading yet is semiconductors, and they're getting there very fast, and aerospace. And they will get there in aerospace fast as well. They're leading everywhere else. Without even saying that they were doing Made in China 2025. When they were slapped with these sanctions, they stopped talking about Made in China 2025. They kept doing what they're doing, which is investing in research and development at the highest levels everywhere. Plus the influx of first-class physics and mathematics brains back to China, from the US back to China. This is how you do it. And you plan it in advance. It's very, very simple. The United States cannot plan what's going to happen tomorrow. Can you imagine 5 years or 15, 3 5-year plans in sequence, which is what the Chinese did and continue to do. Everything is planned until 2035. All right. That's it. And our friend, Professor Michael Hudson, I would say he's the top brain on the planet explaining how it works and comparing both models. But okay, I would love to have Michael 10 minutes with Trump in the Oval Office. This might solve a few things, you know.
Do you think that a Ukrainian settlement would influence the war, the economic war between the United States and China, or Russia would be the same as it was before?
There's no Ukrainian settlement in front of us yet, Nima. Story to tell. Story to tell. I always deal with tangibles and real life practice. You know, I travel the world dealing with facts everywhere. We still don't know. And we still don't know if the most important thing, if the American ruling classes will understand the lesson. Probably not. Empires don't understand lessons like this. If there is a settlement in Ukraine, automatically implies a strategic defeat of the empire. Can you imagine them accepting that? Out of the question. They'll never accept it. They'll have to find some sort of deal. And then Trump will sell this deal all over the world as the best deal he could get. And he will announce it as a victory for the US, when in fact it's a defeat.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pepe. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado. It was a pleasure as usual. It's good to be relaxed finally. Oh, it's dark behind me. Acabou
Já escureceu.
Exato.
Não dá para ver nada atrás de você.
Está começando a noite swinging in Bangkok.
Foi muito bom falar contigo, Pepe.
Muito bom, muito bom.
Tudo de melhor aí.
Muito bom. Ok. Nos próximos a gente fala mais de Ásia, de ASEAN.
Com certeza.
Vai ter muita coisa legal para eu contar para vocês todos. I have a lot of stuff to tell you all about what's going on in ASEAN, relations with China. I'll be in China next month. This is going to be a killer. All right?
Great. That would be great.
Everybody. Muito obrigado, Nima.
Obrigado. Tchau. Tchau.
Até. Tchau, tchau.
Tchau, tchau.